And now we're going to join our third colour to make round 3. First of all, we need to make our slip knot. Pick up the work with the front facing you, holding your working yarn behind your work, and you're going to slip stitch join to a corner space. And see, you can identify the corners because we've got 2 sides in one space. So we're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch to this corner space. Insert your hook from the front through to the back, through the corner space, not through the stitch, just the space. Capture the yarn. We're going to draw it through the corner space and the loop on our hook all the way through. Looking at your pattern, we're now on round 3. The first line tells us to make 3 chain. Chain. Now before you go any further, pick up your stitch marker and slide it under the front loop and the back loop of that last chain that you made. That is so that you can find third of 3 chain at the end of our round. So our 3 chain is going to count as our first treble. Looking at the pattern again, you'll see that we have square brackets that say 2 treble, comma, 2 chain, comma, 3 treble, close square brackets. All that information, all those stitches, we are going to make in the same corner space where we've just joined our yarn. So in the video, I'm using my purple yarn and I'm working into the white chain space. That was my 2 treble. I've already filled my chain space, so I'm going to shuffle those round to give me some more room to work. Now 2 chain. Don't forget to look at the screen as well, as you'll see that I have written the information on the screen too. And now our 3 treble. And that is the first bit of information there. Moving on, after the square brackets, you're asked to make a chain. Do you remember we made a chain on round 2, which created a space sitting above the purple stitches? This time, this chain is going to make a space sitting above these white stitches. Now then, our next set of instructions I'm going to be going into this chain space. We call this the 1 chain space, okay, because we made it with 1 chain. And in there, you'll see from the pattern, we're going to make 3 TR, 3 treble into the 1 chain space, this gap right here. One. 2. 3. Okay, can you see that the one chain we made just before these 3 trebles has now created a space above the trebles of the previous round? Okay, there we go. But we've also increased on this round, so we've got one gap here, but our instructions tell us to make another chain, which is going to give us a space sitting above these trebles. So we'll now have 2 spaces along the side. This is our increase. You'll also notice from the pattern that after making this one chain, you got instructions within square brackets again, and those instructions are going into the 2 chain corner space, so the corner that we're just approaching. So I'm now going to make all of the stitches into this corner space that are indicated on your pattern between the square brackets. There we go. You'll see that we've just made another corner. Can you see we've got the first half of the corner here, then we've got the chain which makes the 2 chain that makes the corner, and then the second half of the corner here. Follow the instructions, repeating for as many times as the pattern tells you to repeat until you get all the way round to the other end of round 3, and I will join you again and remind you how we slip stitch join. So join me in a minute. Now that we've come to the end of round 3, I just want to check that I've got the right stitches in the right places. I know that I need 4 corners, which are made up of 2 groups of 3 trebles with 2 chain in between. So I look at my first group here. So I've got 3 stitches, I've got my 2 chain space and 3 stitches. So that's my first corner, my second corner, my third, my fourth corner. I also know that I should now have 4 groups of 3 trebles, 1 group on each side. So there's my first one, there. That's my second group of 3 treble, third group of 3 treble, and my fourth group of 3 treble. Now along each side we should have 2 1 chain spaces in between each of the groups of trebles. There's my first and my second on that side. So you'll notice that on round 3 we have 2 side spaces, chain spaces, whereas on round 2 we only had the 1. Okay, these are our increases, and you'll notice that when we do round 4 we'll actually have 3 of these spaces. So I've got 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So that means we've got 8 1 chain spaces around round 3. To close off, slip stitch join to the third of 3 trebles, and that was where we put our stitch marker at the beginning. We want to pick up the front loop and the back loop of the third chain. Remove my stitch marker. Put the slip stitch join you pick up the yarn, draw it through the stitch and the loop on our hook. Fasten off, cut the yarn round and draw it all the way through. And that is round 3. So I've come to the end of round 4 and I'm going to slip stitch to my third of 3 chain and then fasten off. Pick up my front loop and the back loop of the chain, remove my stitch marker, yarn round through my chain stitch and my loop on my hook, cut my yarn round, pull it all the way through, finished. And there you have round 4. If you turn it over, you'll see we've got quite a lot of ends where we've cut our yarn from our ball. So what I'd recommend now, before we go any further, is that you weave those ends in. So I'm just going to get myself my yarn needle. So we're just going to pick one of our ends and we're going to weave it in. So thread an end onto your yarn needle. Okay. And all we're going to do is we're going to weave it through our stitches a few times. Okay, so I've gone under some stitches there. I'm just going to come up through a couple of stitches. Always do it on the reverse of your work because you don't want to have to see it. I'm going to cut across these couple of stitches. I'll just weave it into the strands that are already there. Come down this side. Take my needle off. Pull it tight, okay. Snip as close to your work as possible, but without cutting your stitches. Trim that end off, and then it'll be hidden within the stitches. It's as easy as that. So go ahead, sew your ends in, and I'll join you again for round 5 and 6, where I will teach you a new stitch. So now that we've got our 4 round granny square, we're now ready to start round 5, and you'll be introduced to a new stitch. This stitch is called a double crochet. So first things first, get your next colour and joining with a slip stitch into the first treble on one of the sides. There we go. So I picked up the first treble, that's the stitch at the top of a treble. So you put your hook under the front loop and the back loop from the front through to the back. And we're going to slip stitch join our colour. So I'm going to draw the yarn through the stitch and the loop that we have on our hook. You should be quite proficient with that now. So to start our round, we're going to do 1 chain. The reason we're doing 1 chain is because that is the height of a double crochet. A double crochet is the shortest stitch. So 1 chain. And we're going to put our first double crochet into the stitch that we've just joined our yarn, which is just here. So to make a double crochet, we're going to go in the stitch, yarn around our hook and draw it back through the front. So we're just drawing our hook back towards us through the stitch, and we now have 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to take those off now in one motion together by yarning round and drawing it through both loops. We go to the next stitch, insert our hook, making sure we pick up the front loop and the back loop. I'll zoom that in so that you can see. We're going to insert our hook into the next stitch. We're going to put our hook through from the front to the back, under the front loop and the back loop. So you can see those 2 loops on the hook. When we come through, we're going to capture the yarn with our hook, twist it slightly so that the yarn doesn't fall off as we draw our hook back towards us through the stitch to bring up another loop. So we've now got 2 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over our hook and we're going to draw that through both those loops to make a double crochet. Once more, can you see the shape of the stitches? They look like chevrons and they're all going in the same direction. So we're going to insert our hook into the next stitch under the front loop and the back loop. We're going to twist our hook around the yarn to draw up a loop. So by bringing our hook back towards us through the stitch, I've caught the white, there we go. So we've got 2 loops on our hook, yarn over and draw that through both those loops to take them off our hook. It's a double crochet. When we get to a chain space, we want to put 1 double crochet into the chain space. So we're not inserting our hook into the stitch, we're going to go in the chain space, capture the yarn, bring it back through the front. We have 2 loops, yarn round, and we're going to pull that through the first and last loop to take them off our hook. So we end up back with 1 loop. So again, so now we're at the next group of 3 trebles, and very carefully you need to move our double crochet over a bit so that you can see the top of the first treble. You'll see the treble there, and at the top of that stem you'll see the space where you're going to insert your hook. So we put our hook in, yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over, take off those 2 loops. So as per the pattern, we'll put in a double crochet into each treble stitch, across and in each chain space. So we're back at a chain space now, so we go into the space, draw up a loop, yarn round and take off those 2 loops. Another group of trebles. Again, this double crochet is kind of covering up slightly the stitch that I want to go into, so I'm just going to shuffle it out the way so that I can see there the gap that I want to go into. Another chain space. Now we've reached the corner. We want 1 double crochet into the top of the next 3 trebles. So again, I've moved the purple double crochet over so that I can locate the stitch. You see? so that I can put my double crochet into 1, 2, and 3, and now I've reached the corner. You'll see from the pattern it's asking you to make 3 double crochet into this space. We're going to insert our hook, draw up a loop so that we've got 2 loops, yarn over and through. So that's number 1, and again 2, 3. Now this time, because there's 3 stitches in there, we have covered up the top of the next treble, the other side of the space, which is where we want to put our next double crochet. So all we're going to do is move those DCs, double crochets, over to the right, unless you're left-handed, in which case push it to the left. And can you see we've now opened up the treble stitch there? We can see where we're going to put our hook. There we go. So follow that all the way around the outside, 1 double crochet into each treble and 1 chain spaces, and 3 double crochet in the corner chain spaces, and I'll meet you back at the end of round 4 to join and fasten off. So I'm almost round to the end of round 5, and I've stopped here at my last chain space because we're now at our 3 chain stitch, the one that we're counting as a treble, and sometimes it can be a bit tricky to find where you want to insert your hook. Now thankfully I made my stitches a little bit larger than I would normally, so I can see, can you see that gap just at the top of the 3 chain here? That's where I'm going to insert my hook for the next double crochet. That's 1. There's my next one. My next one. And now I'm at the last corner. This is where we started with the chain 1 at the beginning. And this is our last corner. We're going to put 3 double crochet into the corner. 1, 2, oh, try not to drop your hook, 3, and we're going to slip stitch to our first double crochet. So we don't want to slip stitch to the chain here, we're going to slip stitch to our first stitch. Now you remember I spoke about how each stitch has 2 legs that wraps around the yarn below. So find those 2 legs and you'll see the stitch at the top, and I'm just poking my hook through from the front to the back, under the front loop and the back loop, and we're going to slip stitch to join. So we're going to yarn over and bring it through the stitch and the loop on our hook. Now you're going to be carrying on in the same colour, so you will need to make a chain and then make a double crochet into the same stitch that you just joined in. So that's what you will be doing. I'm actually going to fasten off here so that for ease we'll have a different colour on the last round to show you how to do the increases in the corners so that your work will sit flat. So I'm now just going to cut my yarn off and pull it through, and I'll see you back here in a minute with the colour on the next round. So we're now on to round 6, and you will have carried on in the same colour, so you'll have done a chain 1, and then we're going to put a double crochet in the same stitch at the base of our chain. And for round 6 we're going to put a double crochet into each of the double crochet stitches, which will take us up to the corner, so bear with us, I'll bring that in a bit. So we're going to put a double crochet into every stitch across the side. So let's hook into the stitch, grab the yarn and draw it up, yarn round and through the 2 loops to take them off. I'm going to do this right up to the corner. Okay, so we've reached our corner. Now you remember on the previous round we put 3 double crochets into the corner chain space. This time you want to double crochet into the first one of those 3. In the second one of those 3, so the one in the middle, we're going to put 3 double crochets into that space. This is so that we can increase and it will keep our work flatter. You see, so we've got 3 double crochets in that one, and in the third one of that space we only put 1, like that, as we go around the corner. Like that, to give us that nice curve, and it'll mean that our work will sit flatter. Carry on until you get to the end of the round, and then slip stitch to your first double crochet of the round, and you can fasten off, ready for the next part.